Good evening. There is in German philosophical language a fascinating concept, Eingedenken. It is an idea that originated in the prose of the young Ernst Bloch, the philosopher of the principle of hope, that was passed on to Walter Benjamin, who made it a key concept in his thinking. The verb gedenken means to be mindful, to remember. With the additional prefix ein, it can be translated as remembrance. According to Benjamin, it means the eruption in the present of a need coming from the past. And not in the sense of restoration of what was, but in the view of a new and original experience of the present. The past, on certain occasions, burst into present with its demands, making it jump, making it leap. So we're therefore talking about a past that would not have exhausted its possibility at the moment it presented itself, when it happened. In other words, a past that would contain a sort of impetus towards the future. Like Angelus Novus, of which Benjamin speaks in the ninth of his thesis on philosophy of history, an angel drawn towards the future to which it turns its back, keeps his gaze on the past, which appears as a single catastrophe that ceaselessly accumulates ruins upon ruins, and yet maintains the anxiety to hold on to it and to awaken the dead in order to do them justice. And in a certain sense, this is the philosophy of the Gardens of the Righteous. From the first one in Montestella, Milan, a hill made from the rubble of war, and in more than 100 places in Italy and Europe, where memory and the stories of the righteous break into our present to teach us to see, foresee, and prevent genocide, hatred, and racism. The gardens are not parks of remembrance or a tombstone of the good. They are places inviting us to look to the future, studying, reflecting, and telling the stories of those who chose, at their own risk, to save others, the truth of facts, dignity, humanity, showing that even in the most dramatic and controversial situations, it is possible to remain human. Gariwo Foundation has been working for some time on a digital encyclopedia of the righteous, which tells and documents their stories, keeping them alive, doing justice to the dead, and also to some, luckily, who are still alive. This is an important educational tool and a stimulus to build new gardens that will help students, in particular, to investigate, research documents, interview witnesses or their relatives, and discover the contradictions that lurk in every human story and which make it all the more true. Telling the stories of the righteous is the most effective way to learn to see that history and personal stories are terribly complex and never black or white. In many occasions, we said that the righteous are not saints or mythological heroes. Their greatness lies in their contradictions and indecisions. As Hannah Arendt wrote about Walter Benjamin, finding and recounting the righteous is the work of a pearl diver, and so did the Polish-born Israeli magistrate Moshe Besky, who survived Shoah thanks to the generosity of German industrialist Oskar Schindler. As Gabriele Nissim recalled in Il Tribunale del Bene, Beschke fought for the German to be considered in 1963. Schindler was considered a righteous in the Garden of Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. Schindler was a Nazi entrepreneur, certainly not morally blameless, who exploited free labor of Jewish prisoners in Krakow. However, when the time came for them to be killed, he had an issue, a problem of conscience, a glimmer of humanity. And thanks to the famous Schindler's List, he managed, risking to save almost all of them. In the dark night of history, the pearls of the righteous illuminate moments of humanity and courage. The problem with this work today is that Europe is deluding itself into thinking that it can keep the future out by taking refuge in the worst of its past. Wars, liberticidal laws, hostility towards foreigners, fearful and rancorous conformism. And this way, it's not easy to teach that the righteous are first and foremost people who have contradicted laws, realizing the difficult truth or principle established by the Nuremberg Tribunal. Wrong orders are not to be executed. Wrong laws and anti-humane walls are to be got around. And the righteous are often like Antigone, rebels against Creon's unjust and cruel law, even if justified with a reason of state prohibiting the burial of Polynices. She transgresses in the name of mercy, brotherly love, the unwritten law of the human right to be buried. This is why Simone Weil wrote that Antigone is part of the human and ideal heritage of each one of us. During Nazi occupation in Kaunas, that was the capital of Lithuania, Jan Zwartlake, a Dutch radio salesman, who became consul by necessity, and Japanese diplomat Kiune Sugihara did not obey authorities of their own countries and the laws of occupying forces. By forging documents, they managed to let several thousand Jews escape, like the Italian Giorgio Perlasca, a meat trader in Hungary who even passed himself off as a Spanish consul. They put the law and the rules of diplomacy before the law, the will to save those who would otherwise have been killed. This is what the mayor of Riace, Mimo Lucano, did more recently and in less tragic conditions. He was sentenced to many years of prison for having worked to help those who landed going against the law with shortcuts that were also questionable, but selflessly convinced that they were the only way to solve real problems, to make the state work, and to help people. He also followed a greater law, that of equality and the right to dignity of every human being, a law which, luckily in Italy, is affirmed by the Constitution. In front of Trieste's railway station, there is a bare garden with a few shabby benches. There, Lorena Fornazier and her partner, Gianandrea Franchi, who founded the voluntary association Linea d'Ombra, treat migrants. They treat their feet with bandages, plasters, and disinfectants to prevent them from becoming infected after walking so much. Newspapers all over the world have talked about it, and Adriano Sofri has written about it. Trieste police searched their flat and took away documents, phones, and computers. The hypothesis of crime is aiding and abetting illegal immigration. That garden in Trieste is something alive and a sign of humanity. It is therefore also related to the gardens of the righteous in terms of the values they practice, because the gardens of the righteous also tell everyone about the stories of those who, listening to their conscience, acted to stop evil, to prevent it, to mitigate its effects. Their symbolic value is great. The very existence of these trees is an island in parks, schoolyards, institutions that bears witness to a community of people who have valued the deeds of courageous individuals, like the mad Antigone, so to speak, who breaks the wall of indifference. They are symbols that survive the passage of time and will never disappear in the conscience and memory of each one of us, because they are one of the best weapons that we have against indifference. Liliana Segre was, we heard that, who was deported to Auschwitz when she was 13, wanted on the wall of Shoah Memorial under Milan's railway station the word indifference to be written on the wall. I am often asked how this could have happened, and I always answer with this word indifference. If you think that something does not affect you and you turn away, that is when the horror begins. The gardens of the righteous are places of memory. They speak to our ethical conscience. Memory must be cultivated as something alive and not as a celebration or recurrence, and it needs continuous reflection and reconsideration. It must never be taken for granted, nor can we be satisfied once and for all with what it tells us. This is why Gariwo Foundation has promoted and just published the book Questions on Memory, Domande sulla Memoria, which gives an account of a wide-ranging discussion about scholars on the contemporary meaning of memory and on the competition between memories. More volumes like this will follow because there is a great need for reflection and debate without prejudice. Indeed, we cannot continue to ignore the fact that after the enormous and in some ways unprecedented tragedy of Shoah, other peoples have entered the scene to demand recognition of their genocides. Armenians, Rwandans, Cambodians, Roma, Ukrainians, Rohingyas, Uyghurs, Czech philosopher Jan Patočka, founder of Charter 77, who died after being questioned by the police, called for the creation of solidarity of the shaken as a more commitment of all the offended towards the new humanity. So remembrance is cannot be this safe. It's precisely an eruption of the need from the past into the present. Thank you.